Good afternoon to you. I'm Merv Wyeth and I'm a member of APM's Benefits Management Specific Interest Group. So on to the topic of our webinar, creating and capturing value from projects. And I'll read through this as you perhaps follow me on it. So strategies fail at over 70%, and projects waste eye-watering amounts of money and estimated at £3 million every minute. And that estimation comes from the PMI. The acceleration of the VUCA world piles pressure on organisational leaders to change, transform, just to catch up or to stay relevant. And today, Iain will share his 3 Ps to success and a value management framework that supports value creation and captures and a capture approach to project delivery. So, what do we know about Iain? Well, Iain is an inspirational thought leader. He's known throughout the world for using his head, heart and gut to deliver inspiring and thought-leading presentations. He comes to this with 30+ years of professional leadership experience to help craft his speaking, training, mentoring and professional director activities. Iain is the author of a top-selling business book, The Business of Portfolio Management, Boosting Organisational Value Through Portfolio Management. Iain is a Scot and he's based in New Zealand, where the time this morning is 1:30. So that's what I call real commitment. I met Iain at a conference in Los Angeles a couple of months ago and liked what he was saying. So I went on to buy his book and invite him to run the webinar today. And there's in it a picture of me enjoying a book-related moment with Iain. So on to the question to find out a little bit about you. So what we want to know now is what term best describes the main focus of the organisation in which you work. Okay, and I'm sure that Iain, you'll be able to see these coming through, and no doubt they'll resonate with sectors that you've worked in, etc. Beautiful word cloud there coming through. What type of project-related job role do you typically perform? So this is actually taken from the IPA Project Delivery Capability Framework, and it really chunks up project delivery into 3 main areas. Project leadership, that's senior management director level. Project delivery specialist, some of those important control functions within projects. And then business analysis and change specialist, one of my favorite, and that's where benefits management sits. So again, thank you for all those responses. And Iain, I'm sure you can see there's a good range there. And once again, welcome to you, Iain. And we recognize the commitment that you're making in presenting to us today. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Merv. Thank you very much. And it was fascinating just watching those Mentimeter results come through. So hello, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in and joining this. Hopefully, I can share with you some thoughts and some views. As Merv rightly said, we have limited time. So what I want to do is just get into it, get past this title, and share with you, as I said, some thoughts and views around value creation, value capture. I took a while to choose this title, actually, while we're on here, just to share this thought with you. And I ended up with this particular title, as you can see, but I was actually thinking around the term at one stage of becoming a value amplifier was a term that I was sort of playing with, but ended up staying with this one. And the reason I ended up staying with this was simply that around the world, I meet people and have conversations with people at all levels in an organizational hierarchy, and I see a great emphasis on the creation of value, and that 2 words being used quite often. What I wasn't hearing was the creation and capturing of value in a joined up sentence, as it were. So, you know, at a board of directors or senior executive level, I would hear conversations around creating value, adding value, etc., etc. And then in a delivery capability within an organization, I would hear, you know, about not necessarily the term capturing value, but delivering value was a term I was hearing. What I wasn't hearing was the 2 things joining up. And just to move on, if I may, to the next slide, we see, well, why do we have this emphasis on value management? It is becoming, I think, a topic of not just today, but perhaps more importantly, a topic for tomorrow, as organizations wrestle with various factors, which I'm about to show you. So that prompts the question, why value management? And as Merv shared with you in some of the opening comments there, we do hear that from the Economist Intelligence Unit, headquartered in London, that based on some survey work they've done, that upwards of 74% of all strategies fail across all organizations around the world. Now, we don't have time to go into the definition of failure and what does that actually mean, but I think for the benefit of this context, I think it tells us that we might talk a really good story about strategy, but we fail because somehow it's either one, too abstract, too fluffy, or is not communicated sufficiently well, so that people who are in charge of delivery functions tend to wrestle with the ambiguity that's associated with it and end up doing their own thing effectively. So that gives rise then to the second element of evidence, which is this PMI survey, again done globally, that suggests that there's $3 million per minute wasted. So I think if my mental arithmetic is right, in the time that we're all together in this webinar, the total would be the equivalent of something like $180 million in a 1 hour period. That's what's wasted around the world every hour, which is a frightening amount of money. But of course, it presents opportunities. So there's just two snippets of evidence that would suggest that maybe we need to talk more about value management. Maybe we need to rethink value management from some of the existing stuff that's around. But there's a couple of other things that we need to be aware of as well, and what I refer to as the VUCA world, which is an acronym for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, so hence the VUCA world. And some examples are geopolitical, globalization, environmental, technology. I think most of our popular media around the world, talk a great deal about technology advances, AI, VI, etc., etc., etc. And sure, that's going to affect us. But I think in a project-related world where we're wrestling with change, we're trying to implement strategies and various other initiatives, then if we're doing business globally, we've got to be aware of the geopolitical scene. And most of us are probably watching the USA versus China sort of trade war spat that's taking place now, and when you think about that and watch the happenings, we already are beginning to see how that's beginning to affect some economies in different parts of the world. So there's concern with that. The aspect of globalization, whether we have free trade agreements or whether we don't, whether we put up trade barriers, again linking back to the first point, whether we see unrest, civil unrest that we just all saw on our TV screens earlier this week, and in other parts of the world we see this movement. I think leaders, all leaders, I think, are becoming more tuned in to the environmental aspect, and it was really interesting to observe. I think it was in BBC News, I think just recently, that the EU, by way of an example, the EU have committed 250 million euros to assisting in cleaning up what's referred to as the Great Garbage Patch, which is a massive area of plastic that's been floating around almost like an island in the northwest Pacific Ocean, just off Hawaii, apparently. So there's various attempts to clean it up. And I think that's just an example of people's greater awareness as leaders look to balance a little bit. And as I said, technology. And a third group are really stakeholder expectations. I think whether we're in for-profit or non-profit environments, we have the faster, better, cheaper sort of mantra, or in a non-profit environment, in a public setting, quite often we have the doing more for less or doing more for the same sort of mantra. I think are putting expectations from stakeholders on leaders to look at their performance aspects and perhaps lift their performance in some cases. You don't need to be Scottish to know that funding is not as easy to get as it perhaps once was. Whether again it's public funding or internal funding, there's more rigor, I think would be the word I would use, on accessing funding and seeking funding for various initiatives that organizations may have within their respective strategy and business plans. So I think all of that together then has sort of put this emphasis on value management. As I said earlier, value creation is talked about a great deal in boardrooms and executive rooms, but I think we need to shift the conversation to not just value creation, but value creation and value capture, hence this slide. One more bit, which is my awful attempt at drawing a fish diagram, so my apologies for that. You can see art is not my forte, but look, I wanted to just highlight a number of things that you can see on the left-hand side, highlighted red. Just some examples of where, again, value gets eroded or we lose value within an organization. You can see some of the causes along that fishbone scale there. Complexity, systems, skills and resources. Do we have the capacity? Culture, I think, is something that's becoming very, very relevant and greatly talked about in various offices in different parts of the world. As you would expect, the correlation with business cases not tied to business objectives or unclear or poorly defined plans. I think they all contribute, again, back to those two fairly sobering statistics of 70+% of strategic failure and the huge waste of money, which equates to, I think, again, quoting a bit of a PMI research thing, something like 28-29% of projects are failing, something like that. It's giving us those sort of dollar amounts. So, certainly room, I think, for improvement as we look forward into the VUCA world. So I think hopefully at this point, everybody, you would hopefully agree that there's a need for change. If we carry on, then the wastage is going to continue. If we carry on, perhaps the VUCA world is going to overwhelm us. So you would think that at this point then there's good cause to rethink how we approach strategy, rethink how we might deliver that strategy and capture the value that we're seeking as organizations, teams, etc., etc. So that means then we need to look and begin to look at some sort of transformational change to combat the VUCA world, to allow ourselves to become more nimble, more flexible, more agile, if you prefer. So how do we do that? Well, we have to set about changing the organization. How do we do that? Well, we need some themes, we need some anchor points. I think it's not just a case of throwing some sort of change management process at it. It needs to be anchored around something. And I think, and I purport that the 3 P's to success, which I'll go on and share in a moment or two, is a fantastic way of anchoring around a theme for a transformational step or transformational change of an organization. That theme then needs to be bundled together and operated in themes or elements of value management, true portfolio management. And my definition of portfolio management is this is how we do business. So it's very simple, very focused. So value management together with portfolio management within some sort of light, flexible matrix structure that allows for some speed and agility to operate within the organization. Number 4, pivot around a very, very clear vision. So there's a massive leadership challenge here. Pivot around a very clear vision. Make sure that those 5 or 6 strategic goals are well understood and articulated, and that the corresponding business objectives might be, I don't know, 20 odd, 30 odd of those perhaps, that are tied back to these goals. Are again very clearly communicated and understood by everybody, and that there's integration of those back in through the value management process into various portfolio content. And the portfolio content, just to go back to that 3rd bullet point, is made up of both operational expenditure, OPEX, and as well as capital expenditure, CAPEX. So it's blending OPEX and CAPEX together, I think, is a way to look at the whole of the organization and make better investment decisions as a consequence of that in terms of balancing between OPEX and CAPEX. My 5th transformational step then is balancing risk with opportunity via the continuum of investment. I'm going to show you the continuum of investment in a moment. But I think, again, I look at my boardroom observations and I listen and I hear a great emphasis on risk. I see in various executive places, I see in some EPMOs where there's a big focus on risk and risk avoidance and risk management and trying not to do anything or make decisions that could adversely affect that. What I don't see is more conversation around the leveraging and exploitation of opportunities that may pop up. I don't think there's enough conversation that explore balancing risk with opportunity. And I'm sure you'll all certainly agree that if we take opportunity, then that's how we make progress and that's how we get ahead. But at the same time, we need to be very cognizant of risk and manage that appropriately, rather than being very risk adverse and perhaps missing opportunities, particularly as this VUCA world accelerates and begins to affect us all more and more and more. So those are my sort of 5 transformational steps then that is a little bit of a variation perhaps on Gartner's Run, Grow, Transform model, which is about to come up. Okay, so let's explore that a bit further. This is my continuum of investment. And I'll draw your attention down to the bottom of the slide to start with. So the continuum really is staying in business versus getting ahead. Again, that's the variation on Gartner's Run, Grow, Transform model. I've added some stuff into it, modified some bits to it. To me, I don't think it's one or the other. And I think in the 20th century, we've seen organizations lurch towards the left-hand side, i.e. let's stay in business and focus. Or let's in good times, let's drive hard. If I just highlight the bits there in the middle, you can see the value drivers are quite different in terms of the focus that we might have. And I think, to me, it's not just about focusing on the left-hand side or the right-hand side. To me, it's there's a great need to better balance decision-making and therefore the investment in aspects that deliver for example, better efficiency, higher productivity, a lower cost of service, etc., etc. But at the same time, we need, if we wish to get ahead and future-proof ourselves in a VUCA world, explore new markets, new products, services, perhaps, develop and maintain some form of competitive advantage, explore innovation and invest in innovation that gives us gain competitive advantage, or etc., etc. So there's the blending of OPEX and CAPEX, which you can see at the top, and really all strategies should be thinking along that lines. And I think a value management framework that is applied to that allows then for, in my view at least anyway, better decisions to be made, which then can form the beginnings of populating portfolio, one or more portfolio contents. That I think is a good way to start thinking about it. Who's involved in value management? Well, you can see pretty much everybody actually. So the board of directors need to have this very clear, firm vision. They need to be very clear on what the purpose of the organization is, what the definition of value might be. It sets a direction, of course, as any board should and must do. And of course, a board nowadays must put greater emphasis, I believe, on making sure that the culture in the organization is indeed a culture, a good culture, and not some gut reaction to some sort of popular climate type thing or something similar. So there's a difference between culture and climate, I think, in that regard. Executives, of course, must also determine and populate and encourage and show the way, deploy actions by communications and showing the way, as I said, encourage people. I think there's a tremendous opportunity for EPMOs. So for those of you that work in EPMOs, I think there's a real great opportunity to help organizations deploy value management and linking that with portfolio management and taking ownership of that on behalf of the organization, doing the hard stuff, the hard work, because really, when you think about it, there's not many other opportunities. If you limit it to finance, then you tend to get a very finance, monetary focus on value, i.e. dollars and cents, pounds and pennies, whatever, which is fine if you're Scottish, money is okay. But I think, I advocate that today value is a little bit more than money, and we'll come up to that in a few slides. If we make it an operational thing, if we make it an IT thing, then we tend to narrow it a little bit. So I think a true enterprise portfolio management office, for example, is a really terrific opportunity for people to focus their contribution towards the organization upwards to help the organization link its strategic intent with the day-to-day delivery actions that are taking place. And again, highlighting, emphasizing, underlining even, portfolio management conducted across both OPEX as well as CAPEX. I think EPMO people and people who are leading EPMOs have a tremendous opportunity to guide executives, directors and others to a good place. Value planning, value engineering workshop facilitators. I know that in the construction sector and engineering sector, where some of you are working in based on the survey questions that were done earlier, you'll be well familiar with value engineering workshops, where certainly in the construction sector, there's a great effort down there to protect inherent value and quite often add some new value in that situation simply by workshopping a particular solution and looking to make it better. Sometimes they're done by third parties who come in and act as facilitators. And Merv, I think if I can just link back to you at this point, I think you had a quick question with...
So question there, what other roles are involved in value management over and above those ones that we've just gone through in terms of board of directors, executives, EPMO, and value planning, value engineering workshop facilitators? So we want to hear about other roles, a fair old range. We've seen.
Can you just highlight one or two of them, actually?
Yeah, we've seen customers and suppliers. I think that's
yes,
really
great.
Interesting. And then
yeah, absolutely.
Clients, donors, stakeholders, suppliers again, and funders. So that's coming through.
Was that funders? Yes.
Yes, indeed. So we've got everyone.
Yeah.
We've got sales and commercials. Leaders, centers of excellence, functional experts. We've got a terrific range, so thank you very much for that. We've got over 40 results. So what we will do is we'll share them out afterwards. But I think what brings it home is there's a tremendous range of others that are involved in value management once you start to take this broader view.
Look, just a couple of quick comments then. Thank you for sharing that survey information. Thank you everybody for taking a couple of moments just to throw in your feedback here. I think that's a really interesting perspective actually in showing, I think there were some examples there, supply chain, I would refer to it, where we have, people who are helping our organizations, funders, sales. I think really the picture is that it's pretty much everybody needs to be focused on value. And I think from that, I think we see the emphasis, and again, this takes it right back to the highest level in any organization, that this whole focus around value and value management, both value creation and value capture, needs to become a cultural thing. And that, I think, points right back to our senior leaders to say, well, look, the conversation needs to be shifting to one of how can we engage our organization collectively, how can we influence and inform our culture so that we have one, a common view on what value means to our organization, and two, that having had that common clarity or common definition or whatever it may be, policy, etc., we then, what do we then do? How do we shift our operational processes to allow us to plan better so that we integrate both our strategy as well as our delivery function? So I think that's what's coming out of this. So I want to emphasize that this value management then becomes almost part of the DNA of how the organization conducts its business on a daily basis. And that applies equally to a for-profit as well as non-profit organizations. I think one other thing about value management too that I didn't add, has just come into me now, just again based on that feedback, is that the value management, portfolio management integration that I referred to in the previous slide, and if, for example, that was being managed on behalf of the organization by something like an EPMO, It would integrate in with the organization's ERP and asset management systems, EAM or P3M systems, whatever those may be. I think there's obviously a need to integrate with those so that we have a singular engine, if you like, that's made up of ERP, EAM, Enterprise Asset Management System, whatever P3M tools that are appropriate, allows, again, I think the integration between strat planning, strategic intent through goals, down through the delivery functions of business objectives, value decisions, portfolio content, programs of work, and then obviously projects on that CapEx side as well. So that takes us then to the 3 Ps to success, and there are the 3 Ps: purpose, people, and performance. And I think in the past I've seen great emphasis on lots and lots of models. I guess many of the listeners have have their own experiences of some of the models of the past. I'll not mention specific names, that'll probably get me into trouble. But I think, again, with the acceleration of the VUCA world, the impact that the VUCA world is going to have on us means that we perhaps don't have time to follow an 8-step model of such and such, or a 7-step model of this, or a 5-step model of something else. I think what we need to do now is boil it right down and really, really focus on, hence the 3 Ps to success. And if you can imagine an hourglass, if you're boiling an egg, a little timer, which has got that shape, to me, the conduit is all about people in the middle. So the purpose really is about crafting the vision for the organization, making sure the strategic goals and understanding what those critical success factors are, harnessing and crafting business objectives that tie back to those strategic goals. You might note here I don't have mission in this. I don't think there's a need for mission statements in the 21st century. I just combine that into a vision and say our purpose is made up of this vision, those goals, these business objectives, and our culture is orientated around that. To me, I think if leaders began to focus around those things rather than some 20th century textbook model that says you must have all of this stuff because that's what we did back in the 19th, 20th century, I think we need to shift in order to free up and speed up our organizations. However, we can only do that if we've got the right skills, the right people, and we empower people way more than perhaps we've ever done. And that leaders take some risk and empower people to let go and allow people up and down the organization, across the organization, to make decisions perhaps more than they've done in the past. We may need new skills in the organization to combat emerging technologies, etc., that skill sets that we don't necessarily have today. We have to share accountability more, as well as just responsibility as well. So I think there's a huge emphasis and a huge focus on people required, more than perhaps we've seen in the past. And just one of my pet things, this is not a delegation to HR and say, hey, look, you guys go and sort this. It's all about people. It's much, much more than that. It's about understanding from the highest place in the organization, say, for example, the chairman of the board, he or she and his or her colleagues, in discussion with executives, pushing that down through the organization and really understanding the importance of people, as people are people, as opposed to whatever else it may be. But then focusing on performance, and I think, as you'll see towards the end of the presentation, in order to free up the organization, we need to be looking at lighter systems, focus on driving for results, having a very clear vision of what we're trying to achieve, focused on outcomes. So as a benefits SIG member, the dilemma or the debate is always about outputs versus outcomes. I think focusing on outcomes usually drives performance to a higher level and doesn't allow the organization to get stuck in process conversations, etc. So I think there's some opportunities there. All of this, however, requires strong leadership, and I think there's some caveats associated with that. So again, the elements, the integration of value management, portfolio management, together with some sort of lighter matrix structure. Again, the whole notion is to speed up the organization, focusing around value, looking at options and making decisions around value, using those decisions then to populate one or more portfolios in terms of content. Again, blending and balancing OPEX and CAPEX together. Okay, so moving on. So that gets to the point then where a question at this point would be, well, what does value actually mean? So Iain, what does value mean to you? And I made the point earlier that it's not just a monetary thing. To me, there are 4 aspects of value that we need to think about. And the first one is value to customers. So that's a kind of external perspective, if you like. Second one is value to staff and brand. Clearly, you can see that's a more internal focused on value. I've just, in the last slide, made some emphasis on the focus around people. So value to staff, value to brand. And I think having a strong brand is critical today in the world that's driven by social media, perhaps. It is absolutely critical to make sure that your brand represents the organization that you wish to be, represents the culture that you wish to have within your organization. And it's very, very easy to get sidetracked and have your brand damaged or hammered through social media channels on a global basis very, very quickly because something hasn't gone right. Just a couple of examples, some of the big collapses in the UK just recently with the big service companies. I'm in New Zealand right now. There's been a couple of large construction companies that have fallen over for a variety of reasons, of course. We're seeing already pressure in North America with some of the unintended consequences of the trade tariff war with China. Some manufacturing companies in the USA now are really stressed in terms of their ability to survive. So value to staff and brand. Some strategic value, of course. There has to be some movement towards one or more goals. And of course, no Scotsman would say that financial value is not important. And there it is. So I think in the past we've seen a bit of a bit too much emphasis on just financial value. Today, I think we need to be looking at it from this quadrant perspective. And one other good thing about this quadrant is, for those of you that are in PMOs and EPMOs, it actually allows you to set up a balanced scorecard from a reporting point of view. So if you're focusing around performance and want to shift into a more focused, more strategic aspect of reporting, you can use these elements there to set up a balanced scorecard. But there's also different value types, and that's what this next little bit of the slide is. And so having those aspects and those areas would allow informed conversations to take place. But within that, then we need to be cognizant of 4 types of value: inherent, added, innovative, and value that's delivered now. And you can see I've highlighted each of those highlighted each first letter of those words to make up my Iain model of value types. So for what it's worth, there it is. So inherent value is just that. It's making sure that what we have as an organization, what we do, what business we're in, there's certain things there. It's absolutely inherent, and we must protect that. But of course, as you all know, there's always an opportunity to add value, and that's where value engineering actually plays a bit of a part, where we can add a service to a product to a service, for example. We can make something quicker or less cost. That's all indications of, one, protecting inherent value and perhaps adding a little value. Innovative is new value, as I said, where we might invest or go through a merger and acquisition, acquire new value that allows us to influence. And then we have this aspect of, well, look, here's a conversation we need to have. If we invest in this particular value aspect and this value type, does it deliver value in the short term, the mid-term, or the longer term? And the now really refers to both the short term and the mid-term, where it may be beneficial in a very fast-changing VUCA-influenced world for us to make decisions to say, if we've got A versus B, if A delivers value in the short term, then perhaps we should do that, because if we put our money on B and invest in B, yes, it might give us a higher rate of return from a financial point of view, or it may satisfy our customers, but it may get affected in some aspect of the VUCA world, for example. So that could be, just as I said, an example of that type. So to me, it's about what is value. Then it's about the importance or the worth to the organization of whatever it is we're trying to do. from our strategic goals and business objectives. What is the worth of those, and what are the importance of those things that we're trying to achieve down through those value aspects, down through those value types. So that takes us then to the value management framework, which is this. And you can see there's 5 elements of it. I've got a graphic coming in behind this particular slide, so I'll share that with you in a moment. So again, just emphasizing the interrelationship between value management, portfolio and program of work management, as well as product life cycles. So the first step then, value strategy, which is really the leaders determining what does value actually mean to our organization, what is the policy that we want to put in place, again, so that everybody in the organization, or the aim is to have everybody with a common view on what value is and what it means to the particular organization that we work within. So that's almost a one-off sort of step, really. Having said that, it may mean that it needs to get revisited periodically just to refresh it up, again, based on value. Strategic planning emphasis may inform the strategy a little bit. So, but generally, you know, a less frequent sort of activity. Whereas value planning, value engineering, value delivery, value capture becomes more of a sort of cyclic aspect. And value planning, front end of investment, that's where then we have informed discussions. Again, tremendous opportunities for EPMO to help facilitate some of that, where we're having aspects of strat planning and conversations. We're looking to make decisions as to what we're going to invest in, both from an OPEX as well as a CAPEX, balancing those things, and the decisions are driven around the expected value returns that we anticipate. Those then get built into delivery plans, as I mentioned, i.e. portfolios, and then those portfolios broken down into programs of work. And at that point then the value engineering kicks in, that is looking to, 1, protect inherent value, and 2, to add where possible and where the opportunity exists to add a little bit of value to that decision. Value delivery is the classic program of work and project management. So program of work should, in my view, run across both OPEX as well as CAPEX. So there's nothing to stop that happening, whereas project delivery typically is more CAPEX oriented, but program of work can balance both. So the value delivery is breaking down those portfolios and delivering against clear plans, clear objectives, managing and controlling the value through the management of scope, cost, risk, etc., etc., etc. And at the same time, of course, continuing to manage the stakeholder expectations, both internally as well as externally. And finally, value capture, which is really, you know, just using and utilizing, you know, existing benefits management systems that may be in place, and bolting that on, perhaps streamlining it a little bit, bolting it on, so that allows us to complete the cycle. And that takes us to this sort of picture here. You can see those 5 steps through the middle. You can see the sort of cyclic nature of this. The top horizontal and the bottom horizontal layers are just demonstrating cycles of strat planning, portfolio planning, program of work, project planning, and delivery, benefits realization, benefits management, if you prefer. Down the bottom, then we have a sort of somewhat generic, typical product life cycle, where we might conceive something, develop it, design it, build it and deliver it, and then there's some sort of operational maintenance period. So those who in the audience who might be, say, for example, in the power sector, where you would have plant and your assets that you know, generate value to the organization for 45, 50 years in some cases, perhaps even longer. Would be an example of that. An airline would be an example where they have planes that, you know, fly around for millions and millions and millions of miles over a extended period of time, depending which airline you fly with. Again, another example of leveraging existing assets to deliver good value. So there's the value management framework then, and just linking that back as we get towards the end of the presentation, just linking that then to how that fits in a portfolio management environment. You can see from here just the middle column referring to this somewhat clumsy term called organizational project management component. Organizational project management, I often challenge that myself and say, well, what's the difference between that and portfolio management? You know, if you look at true portfolio management, i.e. this is how we do business, it kind of ends up the same thing. I just personally feel that, and maybe some of you might have some comment on that at the end of this, I'll be grateful for your thoughts. Organizational project management kind of, I think, doesn't sit well with executives. Anyway, that's the term we're showing on this slide. So you can see value strategy is talking about strat planning, budget planning, etc., overall implementation management, and kind of policy driven, as I said a little bit earlier. That's hopefully adopted and aligned with the whole organizational structure. Portfolio planning, value planning is driven by portfolio management, includes all the classic things that we do in portfolio management, optional selection, prioritization, etc., all that good stuff. But the decisions are based on value through one or more of those themes that I mentioned, and commentary and decisions around one or more of the value types that we refer to. Value engineering, protecting and improving the inherent value, enhancing opportunities, as you can see, value delivery, program and project management activity, and finally benefits management, where we're confirming that value is actually being captured over some defined period of time. So there's how it kind of fits in with that sort of portfolio management environment, as it were. And just a bit more on portfolio management. I think, let me start at the bottom of the slide here. The big message here is keeping it scalable, light, and inclusive. I think that, again, the VUCA world is moving so quickly that it's going to really challenge some of our existing thinking, some of our existing models, because we can't react or adapt quick enough. To me, then, it's a case of, first of all, aligning, focusing on the right things, value, deploying a value management framework, doing that in a manner that linking that to portfolio management, but at the same time making it inclusive, keeping it light, and you know, scalable when we need to do it. Some other factors then, you can see the 6 bullet points there, just at random. Absolutely using that value management to determine the content, establishing those critical success factors in the path forward. Again, I think there's tremendous opportunity for EPMOs here to help the organization transition from its current place into this kind of aligned, integrated, value-driven environment. And last bullet point, further changing the organization is necessary. I think all leaders would accept, most people accept nowadays, that change is inevitable, and with change comes uncertainty. It's uncertainty as human beings that we're not particularly receptive to, this degree of uncertainty. We're actually okay with change if we understand it, but it's often as the uncertain aspect of proposed change that makes us a little bit anti, as it were. So again, further reason to keep it scalable and light as we go forward. So before I hand back to you, Merv, just a couple of things then on summary here. So becoming, the whole title here was around, creating and capturing value. Shifting a focus from just a cost-only focus to a whole of business. This is the way we do business. In order to do that, we need to change our organization. We need to adopt the 3 Ps to success. Purpose, having a very clear purpose in the organization. What does that purpose include? It includes our vision. It includes elements of our culture. It includes, why are we here? What's our core purpose? It looks to really redefine and anchor the organization at the highest levels. And those people who lead at the highest levels should then be charged with deploying that, encouraging, and making sure that everybody understands what it means. I think the age of simplification is a term that I coined up when I had the very good fortune to speak with the global CEO. Actually, I interviewed him some years ago, a couple of years ago in the USA, and that was a gentleman by the name of Bill McDermott, who's the first non-German global CEO for the giant company SAP. And he gave a great presentation on a combination of his life and what he did at SAP since becoming, or since he was appointed CEO. And he had to make some dramatic changes because SAP had lost its way and was losing huge amounts of market share through, startups, little simple startups that were delivering, really smart technology very quickly at a fraction of the cost of SAP. So they were losing a lot of market share. In the conversation I had with him after his presentation, we were talking about freeing up a giant German-based organization that was very process-rich, and what that meant in terms of the outcome, in terms of the organization being able to be much freer and move and change direction a lot quicker than it had been in the past. So from that, we coined the term the age of simplification, where we, as you can see in the graphic in the bottom right-hand corner, we took the organizational handcuffs off, and that allowed the organization to move a lot more in different ways. And be, as I said, a lot more receptive to a variety of changes influenced by the VUCA world. So using value management together with true portfolio management, again, just emphasizing what does that true mean? This is how we do business. So it's not one of those great academic definitions. It's this is how we do business, and we're blending OPEX and CAPEX into a true portfolio management environment, not project portfolio as some of our friends in certain parts of the world would have us comment on it. And look, at the end of the day, becoming a value amplifier. I think truly, a bit of a crusade on this, becoming a value amplifier and really shifting conversations in organizations at all levels, in the boardroom, in the executive office, in the EPOs, in the delivery rooms, in the project offices, etc., project teams, program teams, and beginning to shift the conversation, focus around one or more of those value themes that I mentioned earlier, and really driving for value. To build a value management framework is not just putting on another layer of mid-level management processes in, because that's just going to put the organizational handcuffs back on. It's about building something along the lines of what I've outlined and suggested, but at the same time getting rid of some of the stuff that you perhaps already have, that when you ask the question truthfully, does this really help us conduct our business? And if the answer is no, then you get rid of it. That's how you start on the journey of the age of simplification. Because if we can simplify and deploy what's referred to as agile sort of techniques, some of us would call them lean sort of philosophy of lean, where we can speed up, reduce waste, and move much quicker, then again, you've got to be careful about how much process you build in the middle of the organization, because it can just end up choking the organization. So, some interesting conversations with risk leaders, some interesting conversations with finance leaders, some interesting conversations with supporting functions like HR and others, etc. That's not to say it can't be done. Of course it can be done. It's just there's, some people need to have more encouragement to perhaps change from a model today to get our organizations ready for the future. And again, to me, I coined this phrase up, short-term nimbleness, our ability to move quickly in the short term actually leads to our organization being very healthy and builds up resilience for that much longer term as the VUCA world has more and more impact upon us in one of those 4 dimensions that I shared earlier. And finally, look, that's the presentation. Everybody, thank you. There's my contact details. There's some reference to the book that Merv mentioned earlier. It's absolutely available everywhere, including actually in bookshops, proper bookshops, for those of you still like going in and having the kinesthetic feel of a book. It's a hardcover book. It's an executive book. It's selling really, really well, and that's my plug for the book. What I would like to say, Merv, just before I hand back to you, and maybe we can take some questions, is a big thank you to everybody for tuning in, for taking time out at lunchtime to join in. Thank you. I really do appreciate that indeed. And with that said, Merv, if I can hand back to you.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Ian. That was a fantastic presentation, and we'll get to a few questions in a moment. Just to let people know, and I know some of you have started to complete that, within Mentimeter now, we're doing a bit of reflective practice. We're very, very keen on that. It is something that I guess project managers, it should come to them naturally. So we want to know, what have you learned, or what will you do differently as a result of attending this webinar? So a period of reflective practice, and we will leave that question open, and there's some great stuff already coming through. Ian, as I was thinking about your presentation, I think you know that we have quite a number of specific interest groups. I mentioned earlier on that I'm from the benefits management, a specific interest group. We've got a value management one. And I started to think which other groups you kind of, you've actually ticked off in your presentation. And certainly we've got portfolio management. You mentioned around the value of an enterprise PMO, and then I think enabling change and governance. So I got to go down a top 6 of our 15. I think that's really interesting. I guess one little challenging question that's come in from Steve: how do you see the difference between value management and benefits management? So are you able to contrast the two?
Yeah, look, I think it's a good question, actually, and it's one question that some other people ask as well. To me, I think benefits is struggling a little bit in different parts of the world. Have been tied up to a process, and I say that in a respectful manner. That would be one thing. Secondly, I think what benefits doesn't do is, well, and there's some exceptions to this perhaps, but it doesn't, I think, focus the decision-making conversation around the value themes that are referred to, the value to customers, value to staff and brand, strategic value and financial value, nor does it, certainly in my observations at least, and even some of my practice when I was still practicing, nor does it spend much time, and therefore doesn't have much emphasis on the 4 value types: the inherent, added, innovative, and the now value. Now, I know Steve's probably thinking, yeah, there's lots of exceptions to that, and I accept that indeed, and for others who might be thinking that. To me, I think value management is a higher sort of viewpoint or perspective that is triggered in the boardroom, triggered at the executive office, whereas benefits seem to have found its place, rightly or wrongly, in kind of more of the middle management layers. And again, if we were to look at a governance perspective, we hear lots of commentary and benefits around governance, but when you actually unpick that, it really is just a management layer. And not necessarily a true governance as you would expect in a board of directors environment. So I'll offer that, Merv, back to Steve. That's probably a conversation him and I could continue for some time, actually.
And you talk quite a bit about portfolio management, and I think some of the benefits management piece fits best at that sort of level. But why do we need to shift or enhance portfolio management within the profession?
Yeah, look, and this, again, great question. Thank you, whoever asked that. And this goes right back to when I was scratching my head, trying to think of content for the book. And I thought, if I just write about portfolio management, a lot of people are going to default to this so-called project portfolio management. Which is, again, one of those terms I really struggle with, because, I say, well, what's the difference between that and program of work management, or program management, if you prefer? So I was really struggling with it. And that's why I thought, what? There needs to be a more informed element, because portfolio management is getting affected by this watering down focus on this project portfolio. You look at all the software vendors, they all talk about project portfolio management and project management. They don't talk about portfolio, program, and project management. They kind of boil it down a little bit and they try and sell you this vision. To me, there was a huge need to elevate portfolio management up into a higher part of the organization that allowed the blending of OPEX and CAPEX together, so that the organization was making more informed decisions and balancing across that continuum of investment. So I'll offer that as a little bit of response to that. Another good question.
Okay, I think we're just about getting up to time now. Again, we've seen some fantastic responses around the reflective practice, so keep that coming. We'll explore all those, and any additional questions that we haven't got to, I'll pass them over to you, Ian, and see if we can actually publish them as sort of FAQs. So with that, a massive thank you to Ian for such a thought-provoking and stimulating presentation, and delivered in the early hours. I note, Ian, that you're in the UK next summer and potentially available for speaking and training engagements. So people perhaps should take a look at your website to find out about that.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely. Thank you. The website is Iain Fraser, all one word, .net, net.net, iainfraser.net. So it's just a new website, actually. So I encourage everybody to go in. I will be in Europe for the summer period. So definitely interested in having conversations, yeah, for sure. Thank you.
There are a number of webinars coming up in the future, so check them out on the APM website. Content from this one will be available later today. Thank you all for your participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Merv. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.